In your first
All right. Hey guys, how's it going? We are just about to get started. Got a really exciting, what I think is an exciting show. Lots to talk about. We will be right back in just a few minutes, and we'll be beginning. Please stand by, and yeah, I'll see you soon.
What you doing out of school?
Okay, guys, here we go. We are live, direct, ready to get started. Thank you for joining. I am the son of Moog. And again, tonight we have a bunch of interesting things to talk about. Going to break it into a couple of topics. I'm going to start with cyber news. That's news about this cyber web internet thing that you've heard so much about. We're going to be talking a little bit about some fun and interesting innovations just in the realm of science in general. And then we're going to talk about some neat stuff about space and some upcoming projects that NASA has up and coming. They're kind of weird and like freaky, and the stuff that is in the realm of science fiction, and it'll be very exciting to talk about. A couple of housekeeping items. We will be doing a special live stream event December 18th. For those of you who are fans of the stream and come by once in a while, you've heard me get really excited about the James Webb Space Telescope and all of the awesome potential that has to unlock some of the secrets of the universe. Well, that is getting launched into orbit on Saturday, December 18th. So we'll be doing a special fun live stream event for the launch of that, talking a little bit more about what it's all about, why we're excited, watching the launch, and then holding our breath for 30 days while it goes out to space. It got delayed. Not again. Hold on. JWST. An incident. Oh, God. Okay, all right. Okay, sorry guys. I really should have done my homework on this. Also, Ocelot, thank you for the new angle. Respect. We're trying new things around here. So, a large scale Space Telescope's no earlier than launch date will slip from December 18th to at least December 22nd after an incident occurred during processing operations at the launch site in Kourou, French Guiana. It is where the telescope will launch on an Ariane 5 rocket powered by the European Space Agency. So technicians were preparing to attach the web to the launch vehicle adapter, which is used to integrate the observatory with the upper stage of the rocket. So that's the part that they kind of put on top of the rocket to separate it off when it goes into orbit. A sudden, unplanned release of a clamp band which secures the web launch vehicle caused a vibration throughout the observatory. Let's be honest, words like instant, sudden, and vibration are not the kinds of expression one wants to hear about the handling. Sorry, let me zoom this guy's Rose is pretty small for you. Handling of a delicate and virtually irreplaceable instrument like the Space Web Telescope. However, NASA, the European Space Agency, and the rocket's operator, Arianespace, have a plan for moving forward. NASA is leading an anomaly review board to investigate and conduct additional testing to determine with certainty the incident did not damage any part of the telescope. NASA said it'll provide an update when the testing is completed at the end of this week. And a senior source of the Space Agency said that the testing is currently running ahead of schedule and that provided that some serious issues not identified, the December 22nd launch date should stick. Well, that's kind of cool. Any new setbacks, now web's progress, blah, blah. So that, to me, that sounds like someone fucked up. Like someone clearly did not tie a clamp and something fell and can you imagine like being that dude or that woman or whoever that is, that person who's just like, I fucked up so bad. It's like a $20 billion instrument or something that the whole world is waiting to get in the fucking sky. So anyway, all right, guys. So instead of December 18th, we'll be doing it the 22nd, which is going to be weird because I know I'm going to be on the road for Christmas. So we'll figure out how we'll make that happen. That's going to be an interesting one. But anyway, let's dive right into the news. So I want to talk about this GoDaddy incident that occurred recently. There's kind of two parts to it, which is kind of interesting. So we'll quickly look at GoDaddy news. And there's actually a better site for this, GoDaddy breach. There's like sec.gov, which is the United States government. So we'll read the news article. We'll talk a little bit about what was actually breached. And then we can have a little bit of a conversation on what that potentially means for people if you are like a client of GoDaddy. And again, just some awareness around why understanding these types of data breaches are important and how you can kind of protect yourself against, hacks like this, or at least insulate yourself as much as possible. So over 1 million GoDaddy WordPress customers have had their email addresses exposed. I'll explain why this is a big deal in a little bit, because to be honest with you, most people's email addresses on the internet are already exposed to some capacity, right? So why would this matter? We'll try and get to that at some point if I don't ramble too much. GoDaddy has suffered a security breach that gave an attacker access to more than 1 million email addresses belonging to the company's active and inactive managed WordPress users, according to a disclosure with the SEC on Monday. The company says the attacker gained access to a provisioning system meant to set up and automatically configure new sites in early September by using a compromised password. So that means probably an employee at GoDaddy had a password that was hacked through some other site, and someone put 2 and 2 together and was able to get to either that, or it was like a sophisticated phishing attack. So GoDaddy says that it noticed the intrusion on November 17th and it immediately locked the attacker out before beginning an investigation and contacting law enforcement. The hackers had access to more than just the email addresses. They could also see the original WordPress admin passwords set by the provisioner. This is a big one. As well as the credentials for active users' databases and SFTP systems. So not only did they get their email addresses, but if you had some kind of a secure file transfer protocol system, which is like a file server for nerds, they have your username and they have your password. And if you use those username passwords on anything else, And you might say, what? Okay, so they get into my email. No. When you're using WordPress, typically you'll use credentials like that for integrations, so that your WordPress can connect to something else, so it can connect to your Instagram and whatever. And when they get those passwords, they're able to compromise those like integration points. So that's a really, really big problem. The next one is hilarious. So the company also says that some customers had their private SSL keys exposed. This is like a big one. Now, thankfully, they're WordPress sites, so I don't think that there's a particularly large like security risk in terms of like crazy confidential data. But what that means is that if you have someone's private SSL key, you can essentially impersonate them on the internet. You can have someone connect to your server, convince them that you are connecting securely, through secure socket layer to that particular website, and you're totally not. You're talking to an attacker. So that's a big one. Now, mind you, it's only for some customers, and they were able to fix that pretty quickly. So what does this mean? Like, obviously, usernames and passwords is a no-brainer. Why that's a problem. Why we would be, like, pretty concerned that those were getting exposed out, right? What really worries me about the email addresses and their customer information is now they have what we call, like, a phishing vector. So what they can do is they can take some information that is legitimate about you, and they can craft a very good-looking email that looks like it's coming from GoDaddy or from another service provider, and they can use that customer number. And when you look at like something that looks like a bill or whatever, and it has like all the right information, like a lot of the times you're not gonna really like argue it. You'd be like, yeah, okay, that looks legitimate, and click. Like, yeah, it has my customer number. I know that's my customer number. So having that information exposed really, really increases your likelihood for phishing attacks, and there's a whole bunch of other reasons why it's bad that we don't really need to get into at this time. But this is why like IT security is such a fucking challenge, because you can have the most rigorous password policies. You can have incredibly sophisticated what we call intrusion prevention systems, firewalls, all of these kinds of virtualization technologies that will like analyze what the packets are doing. There's even a lot more happening in like the threat intelligence space around using a machine learning to identify patterns, to be like, this pattern of traffic is weird. Like, we don't actually know what's going on, but this just looks weird. And so we're flagging it, and someone should look at it. And that seems to be having like a lot of, not just popularity, but a lot of success in the cyber security space in very narrow applications, but it works. So for example, you can set up inside your infrastructure to say, if anyone is downloading like a massive amount of data, like A, stop that download immediately, and B, flag it to security so they can go and say, hey, Mark, why are you downloading 3 terabytes of our customer data? And then I would be like, I'm not. And they're like, well, your credentials are. And then they would, figure out, oh shit, someone's in our system trying to download all of our stuff. So, like I said, there's a variety of different mechanisms and technologies, but they don't fucking matter if like users are idiots, and not idiots necessarily, but 90% of the time, I'm sorry, it has to do with like users not paying attention to the most basic stuff, getting phished, and then before you know it, like, it's one thing for you to get phished, it's another thing for a sysadmin who has access to like a provisioning system or like a piece of back-end infrastructure. So it's mildly, it's pretty fucking egregious in my opinion, my humble opinion. All right, let's move on to another news article that we talked about this in a previous Tech Talk, one of my first Tech Talks, I think, actually. And there was a really interesting proof of concept hack that these guys were able to reproduce the thumbprint of the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And they were able to do so by just using high resolution pictures of like her in news conferences with her hands moving around, and they were able to get enough detail out of these photographs that they were able to simulate hacking like a biometric device. Okay, that was a huge development, and that was probably like, I want to say I was at like 5 years ago, maybe. So a lot's happened in this space, and I saw this news article the other day, and it kind of was like really I was like, oh my god, this is fucked and wild. So I'm going to share it with you guys. How fingerprints can be hacked for $5. So this isn't even like, oh, you need sophisticated equipment, you need access to chemicals or other things that are perhaps regulated or difficult to get or traceable or whatever. No, this is a $5 hack. So we're going to walk through this. Fingerprint authentication is a convenient alternative to passwords and PIN codes. Who wants to spend time typing in a lengthy string of numbers, letters, and characters when a simple tap will suffice? Unfortunately, that convenience comes at a cost because unlike a regular password, you can leave your fingerprint on taxi doors, iPhone screens, and glasses of wine at your local restaurant. And remember, this is something that was not really like a problem, with biometrics and fingerprint detectors and stuff like that. So in this article, Kraken Security Labs team demonstrates just how easy it is for a malicious actor to bypass your favorite login method. So we'll watch this video, but first we're going to walk through the process of the stealing of the fingerprint and all of that stuff. And again, if anyone has any questions or points of contention or points of privilege, please feel free to chime in. I want to hear from you guys. So, to compromise a device or account, we don't even need direct access to your fingerprint. So this is the crazy part. Like, one person might say, well, you need to get access to my fingerprint. You need to lift it off with something. It's like, no, dog. No, we don't even need it. So a photo of a surface you've touched from a table at the local library equipment will do. Right? A high resolution. So a photo of a victim's fingerprint on their computer screen. With this photo at disposal, an hour in Photoshop yields a decent negative, which we've gotten here. Okay, so this is the negative of the fingerprint, which we've been able to lift off of this high resolution image, which you can take with like most cameras, right? Next, we'll print the image onto an acetate sheet with a laser printer. The toner creates a 3D structure of the fingerprint on the sheet. That's fascinating. So for those who don't know, the way that laser printers are actually kind of a fascinating device. What they essentially do is they take a piece of paper, okay, and it passes the piece of paper through a device that charges the paper with positive ions. So now the paper is positively charged. Then what happens is it uses a laser to shoot the text that you want to print onto the paper, which literally creates the text but in negatively charged ions. Then what happens is it passes through powdered toner, and that powdered toner is positively charged. So the positively charged toner sticks to the negatively discharged parts of the paper. The positively charged parts of the paper don't stick, because we know like repulses like. And then there's a fusing process that happens. So what happens is there's some heat. The heat fuses that toner into the paper. So there's no ink, right, in laser printers. We're talking about a powdered toner that is fused into the paper using a heating process. So that's why you're able to get an actual 3D structure. You would not be able to do this with a inkjet printer. You probably wouldn't get the same resolution, the same dot, like that. Like the precision of the 3D structure probably is pretty important. So I can't believe how short this article is. Like, I already see where they're going with it. So for our final step, we'll add some wood glue. So this is like Elmer's fucking glue. This isn't again, this is no fancy compounds. This isn't stuff that you need to find at a hardware store. Well, I guess you could find this at a hardware store, I should say. So we add some wood glue on top of it to bring alive a fake fingerprint that we can now use on a scanner. So with the fingerprint in hand, all we need to do is place it on the scanner, and we're able to perform this well-known attack. The majority of devices our team had available for testing. Had this been a real attack, we would have had access to a vast range of sensitive information. So let's watch the video. This sounds kind of cool. It's only a minute.
Fingerprint-based authentication provides a lot of comfort and for a lot of users a high sense of security. In reality, however, we leave fingerprints wherever we go, no matter if it's on a laptop screen, a phone or a glass at a restaurant. And a photo of that fingerprint is all an attacker needs to copy it. First, using image editing, a negative of the fingerprint is created. Afterwards, the negative is printed on an acetate sheet using a laser printer. This creates a small 3D structure of the negative. Next, wood glue is spread evenly on the print. After the wood glue has cured, we are left with
This is amazing. This is really amazing.
And even this unsophisticated copy is enough to unlock all types of devices. For example, we can unlock an iPad using the copy,
iOS
a modern MacBook
devices.
Pro, and even a hardware wallet with fingerprint authentication.
Whoa! So guys, just that's a hardware wallet, which is what people use to store their Bitcoin. So for those of you who buy those like hardware wallets that you think, oh, this has my thumb scanner, it's highly secure, it's like, not so much, dude. Like, I can lift your fingerprint now from a picture of your dirty ass laptop, which most of us have, and it's over. You are pwned, I believe is the industry term.
Authentication. Always use a strong password, and for online services, utilize second factor authentication.
So I'm just going to touch on this really quickly. It's a common point that I like to harp on with my audience, and if, two-factor authentication is so important. The concept behind two-factor authentication is something you have and something that you know. So if someone steals your password, the thing that you know, and you have a hardware token or something that it's like an RSA key or something like that, they also need to get their hands on that as well. And a lot of the times that's pretty difficult to do, right? Even if they get their hand on just the token, they don't have the password, and you could change the password if you lose your token. So two-factor authentication gives you a very high degree of security and confidence that when you're logging into stuff, that it's you logging in. So super, 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 super important. If I can't recommend turning it on for all of your stuff. If you have something that supports two-factor authentication, just do it. I know it's a pain in the ass, guys, but it'll save you money someday, significant amounts of money, or just the loss of data or a really bad day. So we're talking about security. We're talking about hacking. We're talking about, wow, that's super easy to take a fingerprint, but that requires a little bit of effort. You still have to take a picture of someone's fingerprint. You still got to print it. You got to have there's got to be a lot more intent. This next story is actually pretty fucking interesting. One of the Instagram's founders was locked out when one person convinced Instagram that he died. So we've talked a long time about how the concept of content moderation at the kind of scale of the largest internet and social media platforms is essentially impossible. But it's not just content moderation that's proving difficult for these platforms. Policing those platforms for anything requires user-based input is difficult as well. For instance, Instagram recently found out that its process for locking up the accounts of the deceased may need some work, as one person was able to get the Instagram founder Adam Moressi's Instagram account locked out. Moressi's Instagram account was locked because of an Instagram memorialization feature, where users can report to the company that an Instagram account holder has died, and in response, it will block anyone from logging the account and stop the ability to make any changes to the already updated or uploaded content. I find it ridiculous how Instagram lets such things even happen on their platform in the first place. The scammer who claimed responsibility for the lock on Moressi's account, and who used the handle Srendai, told Motherboard in an online chat, the entire banning community needs to be discovered and reported to Instagram so that they can put an end to this. It's basically the dark side of Instagram. So I guess this is something that people are weaponizing against other people. And this person basically has made sort of a political point, right? It's I'm going to go after, the head of Instagram. I'm going to do this to his account to make a point of how flawed their system is. And that's kind of fair. So what is the memorialization feature? Well, an email goes to Instagram's team to trigger the account change. Instagram then requests proof that the person in question is now deceased. They admittedly, more of a request takes the form of a request for either a death certificate or obituary. And while that seems reasonable, it should be obvious the flaw in the system is. I have a method which is as simple as finding an online obituary of a person who recently passed away, they explained, and then submit a memorialized request to the victim's account using the random obituary I found. And it takes 1 or 2 days for support to process. As long as the obituary is recent within the same week, the target will be memorialized. It works 98% of the time. So, interesting. Well, sure, it's fairly funny to see Instagram lock up and memorialize the account for its own boss, who is very much alive. This all becomes less funny when you understand just how this goes for the average everyday user. It's also worth noting that one of the many vulnerabilities that this nefarious actors use to harass targets on Instagram. So, this is clearly something that people can use to just weaponize Instagram. Like, if you don't like someone on there and you want to fuck with them and you want to take their content down, a lot of people go through these like banning things or these reporting things. Like, I can even think of a couple people I've seen on Instagram that like I think are morally reprehensible human beings. I would never say that I could condone doing what this guy did. It's illegal and you shouldn't do it. But what did Chris Rock say? But I understand. Okay, but I understand. So, moving on. Speaking of security, we talked a little bit about Instagram. Instagram is owned by our favorite company, Facebook. I don't know about you guys. I don't give a fuck what they call, like what they changed their name to. It's Facebook. They can call it Mama, Moma, Mimo, Momo, Bibu, Babu, all they want. It's Facebook. So, Facebook is pretending even harder these days to give a shit about security and about privacy. And there's a story that came out recently about them in encryption. And I mean, I'm like all things that I do on this channel, it's wild speculation for the most part. But one of the things that I find interesting that I'll get to is just that I think it speaks to a direction that company has kind of always been on and taking. So let's dive in the article. This has to do with Facebook implementing end-to-end encryption. Now, end-to-end encryption is supposed to exist in like WhatsApp, which they purchased. So I'm sure there's some encryption there, even though I think that's pretty flimsy at best. But what they've done is they've actually delayed Facebook and Instagram message encryption until 2023. So let's just read through the article, and then I'll give you guys my 2 cents, as I'm sure you've come to expect from me. So, Meta's push for a more private experience will take longer than the company initially hoped. According to The Guardian, safety head Antigone Davis wrote a commentary for The Telegraph warning that the rollout of the default end-to-end encrypted messaging for Facebook Messenger and Instagram is delayed to sometime in 2023. The social media firm had originally planned for the move to wrap up as soon as 2022, but it wanted extra time to get this right. The extra privacy is already enabled in WhatsApp, there you go, but Facebook Messenger and Instagram still require you to start an encrypted chat. Meta, then Facebook, started a broader push towards encryption and other privacy features in 2019. The delay could lead awkward timing, at least in the UK. The country is enacting a safety law in 2023 that will require tech companies to prevent abuse and safeguard children. And while it doesn't require encryption backdoors, thank God, current UK Home Secretary Priti Patel hasn't been shy about opposing default encryption. She claimed it would severely limit... Okay, so... I'm going to try and hold myself back here. She claimed it would severely limit law enforcement's ability to pursue criminals. Meta might face pressure to change its plan. Okay. Just because encryption makes like criminals a little bit harder to find, it is in no way, shape, or form an excuse to weaken the fundamental, like the most fundamental freedoms that encryption enshrines. Encryption allows activists and journalists to communicate securely. Encryption allows us to rely on banking technology securely. If we undermine the fundamental encryption of the internet, we are fucked. And so this is something that we as like citizens must continue to remind our legislators and our politicians about, that encryption and strong protections on the internet are absolutely critical to the internet's, not just the internet's survival, but just our well-being. I don't give a fuck if cops can't read encrypted messages. Figure it out. You guys have lots of other really interesting technologies and ways of tapping into people's communications. You don't need to get into their fucking messages if you can really avoid it. Davis says Meta would still have the power. Okay, so anyway, what I really want to say about this, and what's interesting about this, is the fact that it's going to take them till 2023 to get this done means that they essentially just started. Like there's been no real concerted effort to enable encryption on the back end, and there's probably a lot of really good reasons for that. Like there's a lot of like analytics and things that they're probably getting out of that out of chats and stuff like that, and they have to figure out a way to ingest that information without breaking necessarily the encryption. So what I think I guess I'm getting at, and it really speaks to, is like Facebook had no intention of really doing this. They're obviously going to be implementing it, but it's more fundamental in like it's never been a thought. Like the fact that it's going to take them this long to implement it mean it hasn't been on some roadmap. It's not something that's like sitting dark. It's like, well, yeah, no, we've built in like the encryption mechanisms. We really just need to turn on the switches and tweak it a little bit. It's not there because they don't care about security. They don't care about this shit. Facebook is one of the most toxic places that you can put any of your data. And if you can keep your data out of it, better. Recently, I started a Discord for me and my friends. It's been liberating to just stay off Facebook and not have to go in there just for Messenger. It's great. And if people message me on there, sorry guys, join the Discord. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. I thought this was an interesting article. We're moving into just like general science now. So this is called a photon counting CT, and it has some interesting promise for improvements in our imaging technology. So I'm going to read just a little bit about this particular improvement. We'll dive in here. Sorry, I'm half distracted. So, computed tomography, or CT, is a ubiquitous X-ray imaging technique used to perform more than 300 million medical imaging exams globally each year. Use of the technique continues to grow, with the CT increasingly employed as a first-line diagnostic tool for conditions such as coronary artery disease, as well as moving into preventative care and early detection, such as lung cancer screening. But there are still limitations to what conventional CTs can achieve in the clinic. For starters, it's not always possible to image all patients. So medical implants, for example, can create image artifacts and inhibit diagnostic accuracy. There are also shortfalls with regards to image reproducibility and standardization, both essential for ongoing evaluation of disease progress. So imagine you can't get like a clear baseline, or when you take an X-ray, it's like very different, or it's hard to like have a really good read on, is this tumor we're tracking getting bigger or smaller? We can't really tell because every CT we take is like off by a certain amount. So that's a really big problem. But there finally, there's the growing need for functional data alongside the standard anatomical CT images. So these shortcomings are the ones that we had in mind when we started moving into a new era of how CT imaging can be provided, said Philip Fisher, head of CTs at Siemens Health and Ears. Is that? This is where we started point for our thoughts around Natom Alpha. The culmination of more than 15 years of research, the Natom Alpha is the world's first photon counting CT scanner. So photon counting technology enables dramatic improvements in diagnostic imaging, including increased resolution and a reduction in radiation dose up to 45% over conventional CT. So this is actually like a problem for people who have to take a lot of image scans as a result of like an underlying health condition. There's a limit to how many X-rays and how many CTs that you should get. MRIs, I don't think are nearly as much of a problem, because MRIs for the most part just use magnetics. That's the M, that's magnetic resonance imaging. But obviously CTs are, heavily used, and if you have to get one all the time, you're exposing yourself to increased radiation. So if there's a way of doing that scan with a reduced radiation profile, that's sick, right? I'm going to say, Natom Alpha is now cleared for clinical use in the USA and Europe, and Siemens Health and Ears, is it Health Health in ears? Yeah. Is that engineers, but they put health in front of it? Like, that's fucked, right? Like, I'm sorry. That's just, that's ridiculous. That's a really stupid word that they came up with. They'll be showcasing its new system at next week's RSNA annual meeting. So here's the breakthrough. Speaking at media briefings, Fisher described the main differences between the conventional and photon counting CT technology. Conventional CT requires 2 conversion steps to turn photons into a medical image. X-rays are collected by a scintillator, which uses many photons together to generate an optical signal. A photodiode then converts this light into an electrical signal. This process is stable and reliable, but 2-step conversion limits the dose efficiency, and with many photons contributing optical signal, the achievable resolution is limited because you're using many photons to bounce off of whatever you're getting the image off of. So with photon counting technology, we move from a 2-step conversion progress to a single 1-step conversion of X-ray photons into an electrical current that generates the medical image. So Fisher explained that, noting that removing the conversion steps increases dose efficiency. The large dose is that the new technology, we're able to assess each and any single photon separately and also assess the energy level of each and every photon. So that's just like having a higher resolution camera, which is sick, right? This new approach to image acquisition, however, required the development of an entirely new detector material. High purity cadmium telodride crystals. Cadmium telodride, yeah. CDTE crystals deliver the highest spatial resolution of any CT imaging system to date, said Fisher, enabling pixels 9 times smaller than the conventional. That's a pretty heavy increase in resolution. The crystals also completely eliminate the electronic noise from the detector, resulting in a higher signal-to-noise ratio at lower dose requirements. Another advantage is that, unlike conventional CT that often underrepresents low-energy photons, photon counting technology uses all photons equally, which should be particularly beneficial for soft tissue imaging. And finally, the detector's intrinsic spectral sensitivity means that spectral data are available in every scan. That's pretty cool. Clinical gains. Fisher shared some of the examples of how these CT advances could provide invaluable in the clinic. When diagnosing coronary disease, for instance, 7 million invasive catheterization procedures are performed each year, half of which do not lead to therapy. CT angiography provides a non-invasive diagnostic alternative, but conventional CT can suffer from image artifacts due to calcifications or implanted stents of pacemakers, precluding a large number of patients or a large patient population from this approach. So if someone has pacemakers or has a stent, which is typically, I think a stent is just like a tube in someone's body that's used to drain fluid. And as a result of having those devices inside of your body, you will, I guess, have deposits of calcium, which will make the imaging more difficult. So the spectral imaging offered by the photon counting technology enables differentiation between calcification stents, vessel walls, and contrast media. So this allows removal of unwanted data from the image, increasing the diagnostic accuracy. And with photon counting technology, we have the goal to make non-invasive coronary imaging available to all patients that could benefit from it. Oncology, meanwhile, Natum Alpha's high precision is particularly beneficial. Cancer patients undergo diagnostic scanning and many follow-up exams to assess treatment, response, and disease progression. With the conventional CT, however, the image acquisition parameters can influence the image itself, preventing accurate comparison of scans over time. Photon counting CTs, on the other hand, provides a consistent signal quality with stable Hounsfield unit variables for each patient. This is why I should read articles before I go and stream, guys. I'm sorry. This is fucking brutal. I really need to get better at my job. Lung imaging. So this is photon counting. Also, I did read this part, and I hate the way that they set this graphic up. So lung imaging. Photon counting imaging CT allows visualization of detailed structures. Center. Okay, I don't know why you're starting me out in the center. with simultaneous functional imaging, right? For comparison, a conventional CT image is shown on the left. It's like, I don't understand why you said, like, on the left is a traditional CT, on the center is a high-resolution single photon counting one, and on the right is the contrast. So what they're trying to show here is that, like, this is your typical CT, with being able to count the individual photons that come back from the X-rays, because that's what X-rays are. They're photons, just a certain electromagnetic spectrum. It can essentially get a higher level of resolution and also be able to tell the difference between tissues. So on the very right-hand side, what you're seeing is a contrast in a cancer. So cancerous tissues will actually show up differently. So they'll be able to identify tumors or masses with a higher degree of accuracy, using less radiation, which prevents, or I should say reduces, patient exposure, let's say, to radiation as they go through these diagnostic procedures. Crazy, such a an interesting technology and very cool. So I'm glad we could chat about that one. There's another one that I thought, another article I read very briefly. We're going to go through it. I think it was kind of cool. I don't know if there's a lot of like actual practical applications that are that exciting about it, but just the fact that like researchers went around and decided like, hey, I don't know, can we do this? Sure, I guess we just will. So, nanoscale computer controls function of protein and influences cell behavior. So, one of the things, the reasons why we use things like mRNA vaccines is to produce proteins. To go into a cell and say, hey, build this for me. So, I guess one of the ideas is can we actually control the function of a protein that influence the behavior of a cell, or can we get a cell to do something, right? So the conceptual illustration of a nanocomputing agent. So input response elements, there's some kind of protein, there's an on and off output, okay? And at some point we want to produce some kind of protein activation that gets it to an on state. So the creation of nanoscale computers for use in precision healthcare has long been a dream of many scientists and healthcare providers. Now, for the first time, researchers at Penn State have produced a nanocomputing agent that can control the function of a particular protein that is involved in cell movement and cancer metastasis. The research paves the way for a construction of complex nanoscale computers for the prevention of treatment of cancer and other diseases. Oh, God. I'm so sorry, Nikolai. Nikolai Dokolian, Thomas Pasanti, professor at Penn State College of Medicine, and his colleagues, including Yashavantha Vishweshwaraya, postdoctoral scholar in pharmacology, Penn State, created a transistor-like logic gate, which is a type of computational operation in which multiple inputs control an output. So a logic gate is just the beginning of what you could call cellular computing, Dolkian said. But it's a major milestone because it demonstrates the ability to embed conditional operations in a protein and control its function. It will allow us to gain deeper understanding of human biology and disease, and introduces possibility for the development of precision therapeutics. The team's logic gate comprised two sensor domains and designed to respond to two inputs: light and the drug rapamycin. Sorry, guys. My pronunciations are just, like, super on point tonight. Light and the drug okay. So they're actually using, like, rapamycin and, I guess, light. Like, actual light. Okay. Two sensor domains and rapamycin. The team targeted the protein focal adhesion kinase, FAC, because it is involved in the cell adhesion and movement, which are initial steps to the development of metastatic cancer. So when cancer cells move through your body and go somewhere else and start growing, that's referred to as metastasis. That's actually one of the shitty things about cancer, is that it doesn't just stay where it is. It actually can get into your bloodstream, and it doesn't necessarily spread locally. Like lung cancer can spread inside of your lungs, but once it gets in your blood, then it can go to your pancreas and go to your lymph nodes and go to your spinal cord, go to your brain. It can really really fuck up your day, obviously. And so the movement of those metatastic cells and being able to control that, that's or even just a better understanding of how that works has huge implications, right? This isn't like, holy shit, we've cured cancer, but these are tiny baby steps into understanding how we can better work with cells, manipulate cells, or even stop certain biological procedures from happening that are sort of precursors for things like cancer and other diseases. So first we introduced a rapamycin sensitive domain called UniWrapper, which the lab had previously designed and studied into the gene that encodes FAC. Next, we introduced the domain LOV2, which is sensitive to light. Once we optimized both domains, we combined them into one final logic gate design. The team inserted the modified gene into HeLa cancer cells and, using confocal microscopy, observed the cells in vitro. They studied the effects of each of the inputs separately, as well as the combined effects of the input on the cell's behavior. They discovered that not only could they rapidly activate FAC using light and rapamycin, but also that this activation resulted in the cells undergoing internal changes that enhanced their adhesive capabilities, which ultimately decreased their motility, the movement, not mortality. The results published today, November 16th, in the Journal of Nature Communications, we show for the first time that we can build a functioning nanocomputing agent within living cells that can control cell behavior. We also discovered some interesting features of the FAC protein, as well as the changes it triggers to cells when it's activated. Dolkian noticed that the team hopes to eventually test these nanocomputing agents in vivo with living organisms. That's crazy. So again, this is all like very, very, very small baby steps, but incredible stuff. Like really, really, really cool, like steps towards understanding how cellular biology works and how we can manipulate cells to get, results like curing diseases, or even just slowing them down and giving us a little bit more time to figure out a solution, right? Guys, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break, and I'm going to be right back. Please don't go anywhere. Thank you for those of you who have stuck around, as always. Super appreciative, and I will see you guys in just a moment here. Just going to put on some fucking tunes for you. If my... God, I hate... Sometimes my computer may or may not be falling apart after working so hard to... Yeah. What's this shit? This PC working on it? What are you working on? Can you give me just like my C colon? Is that a possibility? I really just want to get to my my P drive. Gotta love Windows, guys. Audio. Be back in 2 minutes, guys. Hey guys, we're back. We are back. We are back. Oh wow. Not only are we back, we're my favorite part of the show. This is actually 3 stories I'm super excited to talk about. I've been thinking about it all day. One of them absolutely fascinating. Like, I didn't even know it was happening. Not that I should say that. Lots of stuff slips by me. But this one kind of surprised me. I was actually like legitimately surprised that I hadn't heard of this. NASA's DART program. We're going to talk about their reactor on the moon and some recent updates on the concept of ion propulsion. So we'll talk about ion propulsion, the new developments, and depending on how things go, we might have time for a little bonus video at the end for my comp sci friends who are interested in this kind of thing. It's a 12-minute video that I'll probably try and do as little commentary on as possible. But anyway, let's start with the NASA stuff. So, NASA seeks ideas for nuclear reactor on the moon. So, if it was a good idea how to put a nuclear fission power plant on the moon, the U.S. government wants to hear about it. NASA and the nation's top federal nuclear research lab on Friday put out a request for proposals for a fission surface power system. NASA is collaborating with the U.S. Department of Energy's Idaho National Laboratory to establish a sun-independent power source for missions to the moon by the end of the decade. So, most people know that, like, almost all power requirements for any space mission are typically gathered via the fucking sun. Like, the sun is the number one source of energy that is incredibly easy to collect. However, it's not super efficient. And if you're talking about needing like high degrees of output, you would need to like charge batteries that can build up the capacity to like deliver enough power. So there's like a collection problem as well. Also probably just as sure like having a backup, like in case something happens to the solar system, we also want to have a nuclear system. Now, NASA is famous for using what are called RTGs. Let's actually take a quick look at what oh shit, I touched my microphone, which makes me think I broke it. I hope not. NASA RTG. So it's a radioisotope thermoelectric generator. It essentially is a nuclear reaction that is constantly producing heat. That's the whole idea behind it. So it produces heat, and then we use that heat to create power somehow. You know, like RTGs are on interstellar probes. So, NASA RTG using... What else? One mission proposed using electric ion engines. That's another one that we're going to talk about shortly. Anyway, RTGs are used in all kinds of space devices to power things, but they want something that's actually like more sustainable, higher output. So this is why NASA is looking to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. There's also a lot of stuff on the moon, like helium. Believe it or not, I think helium-3 is pretty common on the moon in the moon rock, and like helium is an incredibly limited resource on Earth, and we need helium for things like super superconductors, like the stuff that's at like CERN. If we have any hope of having fusion power, a lot of fusion power is going to require super cool helium to produce those reactions. And again, if we don't have access to helium, we're kind of fucked. So the moon is a great place for it. Makes sense why they want to start building stuff on the moon. But also there's like thorium and a bunch of other wonderful minerals. So providing a reliable, high-power system on the moon is a vital next step in the human space exploration, and achieving is within our grasp. And successful in supporting a sustained human presence on the moon. The next objective would be Mars, blah, 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 blah. So really all this news is that NASA is looking for companies to say like, hey, we have a design that you could use in, low gravity environment. And this is how you would transport it and blah, blah. That'd be quite the mission. Like like I said, they've done it before where they're actually launching like nuclear material up into the atmosphere. So it's not like it's unheard of. But a fission reaction, like that's an interesting one. That's a big one. We're going to talk about ion propulsion really quickly, and then we're going to talk about the last space story that I'm particularly excited about, which is the DART program. But let's see if we can find a YouTube video on ion engines, how they work. It's been very video light. I'm sorry, guys. I've been doing a lot of reading this one and less videoing. So let's take a look at how do ion engines work. Oh,
People always ask me why we're stuck with chemical rockets. Seriously,
Sure.
exploding a bunch of hydrogen or kerosene is the best that we can do? Good news. There are other exotic science fiction sounding propulsion systems out there which use electromagnetic fields to accelerate atoms, allowing their spacecraft to accelerate for months at a time. I'm talking about ion engines, of course, and several spacecraft have already used these exotic thrusters to perform some of the most amazing missions in the exploration of the solar system. I know, chemical rockets seem really primitive. Take tons of liquid or solid fuel, light it on fire with an oxidizer, and then use the speed of the explosive gases to give you a kick in the opposite direction. Thanks, Newton's third law. But chemical rockets do the trick. Those gases do give a rocket the kick it needs to get into space. Because they bring their own oxidizer with them, they work in the atmosphere and they work in the airlessness of space. The advantage of rockets is that they can deliver enormous amounts of energy in short periods of time, the kind of reaction you need to blast tons of cargo off Earth and into space. But they're incredibly inefficient. A 550 metric ton Falcon Heavy is carrying almost 400 tons of fuel and oxidizer. The first stage will only burn for 162 seconds, and the second stage will fire for 397 seconds. That gives you a total burn time of about 9.5 minutes. Want to make some maneuvers? Want to accelerate for days, weeks, or even months? Too bad, you are out of fuel.
So the majority of the fuel is literally just used to get us out of the atmosphere, and then that's it. You're pretty much out. So a lot of thrusters would use maybe gas propulsion or something to control your thrust, but you're extremely limited at that point in terms of what's available to you. So ion engines are a solution to that.
Of course, these shortcomings from chemical rockets have led scientists to search for other forms of propulsion, especially when you're out in space, and one of the most successful so far is the ion theory. When you're working out the rocket equation, an important factor is the velocity that you're ejecting your propellant. The most efficient chemical rocket can throw hot gases out the back at 5 kilometers per second. Ion engines, on the other hand, can eject individual atoms 90 kilometers a second. This high velocity gives the spacecraft a much more efficient acceleration. The best chemical rockets see a fuel efficiency of about 35%, while ion engines see an efficiency of 90%.
It's insane. It's a huge, huge
So
improvement.
how do ion thrusters work? It's actually pretty weird and totally sounds like science fiction. Instead of hot gases, ion thrusters eject ions, which are atoms or molecules which have an electrical charge because they've lost or gained an electron. In the case of an ion engine, they're emitting positively charged ions, which have lost an electron. Once you've got ions, you can direct them with a magnetic field, accelerating them into space at tremendous speeds. So where do they get all the ions? The thrusters create them by generating a plasma inside the spacecraft, and they bombard neutral propellant atoms of some gas like xenon with electrons. These collisions release even more electrons from the propellant, turning them into positively charged ions. This plasma soup of electrons and positively charged ions has an overall neutral charge. The electrons are held in the chamber, leading to more ionizing events, while the positive ions are siphoned out through a grid at the end of the chamber. As they pass through this grid, high voltage accelerates them out the back of the spacecraft at speeds of up to 90 kilometers per second. For each ionized particle that the spacecraft can kick out, it gets a tiny kick in return. The whole system is powered by solar panels, so the spacecraft itself doesn't need to carry any kind of battery or power system, minimizing the total weight that it has to carry.
The challenge with this, though, is obviously as a probe gets further and further away from the sun, the less light that it's able to collect. And so this would become probably like a technical challenge if you're talking about interstellar travel. So if you want to go from one sun system to a next, like if we wanted to send a probe to, I guess, like Proxima Centauri, then I don't know if there would be enough light to power a probe. It's a great question for an astrophysicist someday, if we can ever get one to come on the show.
The big problem is that the kick really is tiny. The thrust of ion engines is measured in millinewtons, like thousandths of a newton. Hold a piece of paper in your hand. That's the kind of forces involved. But they can operate for days, weeks, even months, accelerating and accelerating long after chemical rockets would have run out of fuel. So if you're already out of the gravity well of a planet, they're very efficient engines for dramatic changes in velocity. NASA and other space agencies have actually used ion engines very successfully in a range of missions. They've been developing this thruster concept for decades, but were never willing to risk it on an active mission where a failure could end it. So NASA gathered up a bunch of these risky technologies and packaged them together as the Deep Space One mission, which launched in 1998. Deep Space One was equipped with 12 different technologies that NASA wanted to test out, including low-power electronics, solar concentrator arrays, various scientific instruments, and a solar electric propulsion system. Its engine was run for enormous lengths of time, allowing it to make close observations of asteroids and comets, and even Mars. NASA doubled down on the technology of Deep Space One, giving its Dawn mission 3 redundant ion engines. These allowed the spacecraft to go into orbit around the asteroid Vesta, make observations, then break orbit and travel to asteroid Ceres and make even more observations. And it could still have fuel in the tank to visit even more asteroids. Just to give a sense of its acceleration, Dawn can go from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 4 days of continuous thrusting.
That's great. Yeah.
Ion thrusters were used to carry ESA's Smart 1 space.
So what's interesting about ion thrusters is they're not meant to go to get you accelerating quickly, but they can build acceleration on acceleration on acceleration, and it gets insanely fast at some point. Hold on, I'm gonna close my window, guys.
From Earth orbit to lunar orbit. And on the Japanese Hayabusa spacecraft. Ion engines have been tested here on Earth and successfully operated for more than 5 years continuously. With these successes, we're going to see even more spacecraft equipped with ion thrusters in the future. But ion thrusters themselves are getting more powerful and resourceful. I said that ion engines produce very little thrust, but there are some ideas to boost their output. The first is dramatically increase the amount of electricity that you're using to accelerate the ions. Instead of solar panels, NASA considered creating an ion engine powered by a nuclear reactor. About 15 years ago, NASA considered a mission known as the Jupiter Icy Moons Orbiter mission, powered by the Nuclear Electric Xenon Ion System, or NEXUS engine.
It's kind of cool.
The spacecraft would be capable of exploring each of Jupiter's icy large moons in sequence: Ganymede, Callisto, and Europa. The spacecraft would have been launched into orbit in 3 separate pieces, which would then be assembled in Earth orbit and launched off to Jupiter. The spacecraft would use its 8 ion thrusters to study Callisto and then Ganymede for 3 months each, and then settle into a final orbit around Europa.
Wow.
If conditions were right, it could even go into orbit around Io. Of course,
that would have been so sick.
And the mission was canceled back in 2005.
Boo.
There are other ways ion thrusters can be scaled up. NASA is testing a high-thrust version of ion engines known as the X3 Hall thruster. This engine is capable of blasting out ions and produces 5.4 newtons of force. Again, not much, but remember that previous thrusters top out in the thousands of newtons.
Yeah, that's huge. That's
At
huge.
the highest levels, this could be the technology that will carry human astronauts to Mars, cutting down the flight times to just a few months.
See, that's something that we forget, right? Is that we don't have the fuel. Like, we have to launch something at Mars using. So essentially, what we do is we expel almost all of the fuel just to get the rocket into space. Now, what we could potentially do is we could ferry fuel up, so you could basically like send rockets of fuel, which is incredibly cost prohibitive, right? So that when you got the Mars rocket into space, you could refuel it, kind of like in Armageddon, if you've ever seen that, where they refilled the Russian space station. This is how we fix things on Russian space station. So you could refuel in orbit and then shoot off to Mars. But even then, like, you would have to have your spaceship stay in orbit, and then how do you get it out of orbit? Like, how would you have enough power or enough thrust to get it back? And that's where ion thrusters come in. And for anyone who follows, like, the whole SpaceX Elon Musk mission, it's no secret that, like, he said that the first mission will more than likely be a one-way trip. It's not going to be a two-way thing because they're not going to have the technology to bring you back. It's going to be like you're going there, you're establishing a base, and at some point, probably shortly after, you will die. And it may or may not be a horrific death. Time will tell.
Engineers are planning to run the X3 for 100-hour tests this year to see if it has the same...
Okay, so cool. Why is iodine a part of this story, and why are we excited about it? Iodine successfully tested on satellite ion thrusters. So a team of researchers from ThrustMe, working with colleagues from Sorbonne Université, have successfully tested the use of iodine as an ionizing agent in ion thrusting spacecraft engine. In their paper published in the Journal of Nature, the group describes their 2-year test of the chemical element. The team has also posted a press release describing their work on their site. So space scientists have long known that accelerants used to push rockets off launch pads are not ideal for spacecraft once they break free of Earth's gravity. Those accelerants are powerful but often very efficient, and orbiting spacecraft do not need such power to remain in orbit. They just need a little push now and then to keep them in the proper orbit so that they don't fall out and go into the atmosphere. For such craft, ion thrusters have proven to be a better alternative. We talked about that, blah, 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 blah. So, currently, xenon gas is generally used as the neutral atom source. In this new effort, the research suggests that iodine is a better choice for the ionizing agent. So iodine has been suggested as a replacement for xenon before, but the idea has always been discarded because it's so corrosive. Interesting. The researchers with this new effort have developed a way to prevent corrosion and have tested their ideas in real spacecraft. A CubeSat ordering the Earth over the past 2 years. Wow, that's actually pretty cool. So to overcome the corrosion issues, the researchers used ceramic materials and also stored the chemical in its solid form. So iodine obviously comes in liquid, but you can also get iodine in a solid, like almost like metallic-like form. So one of the advantages is that it sublimates. Actually, iodine sublimation experiment. There's this guy on YouTube that I love. Mal Reed, the iodine myth. We'll watch this. We'll talk really quickly about iodine after this. So we talked about corrosion. One of the stages that sublimates easily. The iodine is heated using a power from the CubeSat solar panel and is held in a tank that is directly connected to the ionizing chamber. There, a gas is bombarded with electrons, knocking off other electrons, resulting in the plasma. So we already know how ion engines work. This is just using iodine. Now, what's good about iodine, too, is it's readily available. Like, iodine's easy to find. Like, you could potentially, if you had an advanced enough spacecraft, you could, like, pick it up off an asteroid on the way out and, like, refuel by finding it. Let's talk about iodine sublimation. This is actually a really cool video.
The most widespread misconception. This video has been sponsored by Squarespace. Elemental iodines often used to demonstrate sublimation, which is when something goes directly from the solid to the gas phase without a liquid intermediate. There are a few other common examples out there like dry ice or mothballs, but iodine tends to work better for demonstrations because it's so strongly colored. At room temperature, its sublimation rate is really slow, so we can't see the vapors coming off of it. However, if we put it in an enclosed space, the vapors can build up and get more concentrated, and we can see a faint purple color. This isn't very impressive though, so for the demonstration, the iodine's usually heated. As the iodine warms up,
this is literally what they're doing. This is literally what they're doing in the ion engine,
the
right?
transition from the solid to the gas phase, and a lot more vapor is given off. Then I place a round bottom flask filled with cold water.
So this is fascinating because unlike what you would typically expect is that something would melt, right? And then it would turn into vapor. From there, it would go through the stages. Sublimation is when it skips one of those stages, and you can actually see it.
on top of the beaker.
This is cool.
The iodine vapors will deposit on this colder surface and reform the iodine crystals.
Like, notice there's no dripping, there's no liquid. It's skipping that step. It's essentially turning from vapor or gas into its crystal or solid form.
Okay, so
That's
at
pretty
this
fucking
point,
cool.
you're probably thinking, great, that's a pretty straightforward demonstration. What exactly is the myth that this video is titled after? Well, a lot of people, scientists included, think that because iodine sublimes, that it doesn't or can't melt, which is totally wrong. What I find interesting is that despite it being incorrect, it's still often taught in schools and sometimes written in textbooks. It's definitely up there as one of the most widespread misconceptions in chemistry. For example, I did a quick Google search and I easily found a few textbooks which propagate this myth. One of the saddest parts is that this book is literally just called iodine, but it still gets it wrong.
Interesting.
Just as a comparison, here are some other textbooks which correctly state the complete opposite thing. What's kind of funny is that this one is also just called iodine, but it actually gets it right. Anyway, at this point, I'm kind of just telling you to not believe some textbooks and to believe others without any real evidence. However, I can actually prove it to you really easily. I'm just gonna do the exact same demo that I did earlier, except this time I'll crank the heat up a lot higher.
Crank it up. Just
When I
crank
do
it up.
this, you can easily see that the iodine starts melting. As I continue heating, everything eventually liquefies, and from that point on, it's technically evaporation and not sublimation. So if you actually want to be demonstrating sublimation and not just deceiving the students, it's really important to keep the temperature below the melting point. The boiling point of iodine is about 184 C, but the hot plate is a lot hotter than that. So the iodine starts to boil off, and the bottom of the beaker clears up a little. About a
Interesting.
centimeter above the hot plate, the temperature of the glass is below the boiling point,
This
but
is
still
fascinating.
higher than the melting point. Because of this, the vapor condenses back into liquid iodine and doesn't immediately solidify. Then it drips back down and gets revaporized.
Cool.
Okay, so for me, this is pretty good evidence that it melts and that a liquid phase does in fact exist. But to really just drive it home, I'm gonna do one last thing.
I'm just going to pause here, guys, really quickly. Just a reminder, Niall Reed makes incredible content. Like, if you at all have ever had, like, an itch for chemistry and you've enjoyed, learning about how chemicals interact or seeing experiments, you can literally just lose yourself for hours in his channel. He's got all kinds of cool stuff. Like turning old jewelry into gold bars. This one, great video I watched, making aerogel. Like, again, cannot recommend his content enough. He makes absolutely sick shit, and we'll watch more of it, some other night. But don't need to dive too deep in this one. There was one last video that I really wanted to check out tonight that I thought people, especially my computer science friends, would find very interesting. It has to do with machine code and how computers actually read and talk to CPUs and whatnot. So this is like kind of, I don't want to say it's I guess the video is more geared towards people who are coders, but you don't need a lot of programming experience to understand it. So the interesting thing that this, what's this guy's name again? I should remember this. Frame of Essence does a really good job of enumerating is what the act of compiling is. So if you ever heard of the source code, what source code is, what compiling is, what that means for how a computer processes that code, etc., etc. This is a super informative video and might be how we peter out tonight's stream. We'll see how things go. So we're just going to dive right in, and I hope you guys find this super informative.
First programming class, you were probably introduced to the idea of a compiler. Here's how it works. You first write out your program, but a computer can't read it yet. So in order to actually run your program, you first need to pass it through this special program called the compiler. Then out pops a new version of your program that can be read by a computer. It was probably then tested by running it with a bunch of inputs and expected outputs or something.
So just really quickly, one thing I want to mention if you guys ever hear about, companies getting hacked, like for instance, Twitch got hacked and their source code got stolen. You're like, okay, well, what is source code? Source code is the code before it goes into the compiler. What's interesting about the compiler is you cannot get, it's kind of like encryption. It's a one-way function. You actually can't get source code from the binary. So you might think, well, I have the executable for Adobe Photoshop. Like I have the executable. I have the program. The source code has to be in there somewhere. Like, no, dog, it's not. They have it, and you can't see it because it's on the other side of the compiler.
So there are two versions of your program, the one you wrote but a computer can't read, and the magically generated one that a computer can read. Except it's better than magic. The compiler is a complex machine that bridges the gap between human-readable code and computer-readable code. So what exactly is the compiler doing, and what does the executable version of your program actually look like? What? You say you have no idea what I'm talking about?
This is like new coders.
Oh, I think I know what might have happened. In your first programming class, you probably just used an IDE, in which case this whole process was hidden from you. When you click the Run button, your work is saved, your program is built, and it runs automatically. So now that we're up to speed, what does the executable look like, and how does the compiler... What? You still don't know what I'm talking about? All you did was Python scripting? Oh my god, there are so many edge cases. Okay, this is what happens to programs in general. Deal with it. How does it work? I don't know. Let's find out. At a low level, computer processors can only do a small number of things. They can read and write to memory, and they can do math with numbers they're holding. Modern processors do other things too, but this is basically it. Now, an executable program, the one generated by the compiler, is just a list of instructions for the processor to follow, written in binary. The instructions are things like read these bytes from memory, do stuff to them, write bytes to memory, jump forward this many lines, jump back this many lines, but only if this flag is set, stuff like that. A program expressed in a list of binary instructions is called machine code, and this is the kind of program that your computer can actually read. But why does a computer processor only read programs that look like this? Why this specifically? Well, in short, here's how a processor works. The processor already contains the circuitry to do all of these instructions, but the correct circuitry only gets connected together when the corresponding instruction gets fed into it. The ones and zeros in the instruction cause certain transistors to open or close, which ends up connecting the correct circuitry together to execute that instruction. If you want to look more into how this works, you might want to check out Crash Course Computer Science, particularly episodes 5 through 8. Episodes 3 and 4 are also helpful if you need a refresher on binary and logic gates. Though you could just watch my video too.
This might be an interesting idea for a series. We might go through some of these videos and talk. I'm not a programmer, but I think understanding like the core tenets of how computation works is like really important, especially if your career is steeped in computation.
And for the record, Crash Course isn't paying me to recommend them. I just really like this series. But in short, just know that executable programs look like this. But when you first learned to program, you didn't need to know anything about these complicated machine code things like memory management, operations on bytes, or conditional jumps. Programming was about variables and if statements and loops and functions. Well, these things are just higher level constructs that make it easier for humans to think about programming. A program expressed in this form is called source code. It's the version of a program that a human understands, and thus the version that most humans actually write code in. The compiler's job is to take this source code that is human readable and turn it into machine code that is computer readable. But how does it do that? How does it turn a string of text into a list of instructions in binary? Let's look at some examples. Here's a pretty simple program. Declare a variable of type integer that we'll call x, then assign it a value of 3. For now, this program only exists as source code. I know it looks like it has some kind of structure, but for the computer, it's just a meaningless sequence of characters. It's just text. And I know this program doesn't really do anything useful, but we're starting simple. Let's pass this source code into the compiler and see what it does. The compiler first divides the text up into individual tokens. It's kind of like the compiler is figuring out what the words are in this program. Then the tokens are organized into a hierarchical structure known as a parse tree, which is like figuring out what the grammar is in this program, the structure. Then, the compiler records context about the program, including variable and function names. This is the stuff that a computer needs to keep track of in different parts of the program. In our case, the only context we need is the variable x. Oh, and the main function too, but that's less important for us. The final step is to traverse the tree and figure out some machine code that would effectively do the same thing as this particular source code.
I just want to clarify that, typically, compilers don't go directly from the parse tree to the machine code. There's usually a few intermediate steps that we're going to skip over.
Thank God.
This is what the machine instructions look like in binary. It's a little hard to read and interpret, so let's shorten it by writing it in hexadecimal. Actually, it's still a pain to read. Let's write it out as assembly code, which is a more human-readable version of machine code. That's better. Now, we're going to ignore this stuff here. Just know that it's responsible for starting and ending the main function, which determines where the program starts and ends. This is the instruction that corresponds to the assignment of the variable x. This instruction says to move the number 3 into this memory location. Let's run the program and see what happens. And as we'd expect, the number 3 got put into that memory location. It looks like the compiler decided that this part of memory is where the variable x lives. And that's it. The compiler took our source code, which said to take a variable x and assign it the value of 3, and translated it into machine code, which says to place the value 3 in this part of memory. So our program is kind of boring right now. What happens if we change it? Let's add a line to increment x by 1 after it's been assigned 3. We assign it the value of x's current value plus 1. Now we pass it into the compiler again to generate a new version of our machine code. The compiler finds tokens, parses, contextualizes, and generates. It looks like there's only a single new instruction to add the value of 1 to this memory location. After all, this is the location that the compiler decided that x lives. Modifying the variable x is equivalent to modifying the value stored in this memory location. Let's run it. The value 3 appears in that memory location designated for the variable x, and then the value becomes 4. Now, so far, we've seen how variable assignments and simple mathematical operations get translated. But it's not so simple for if statements, loops, and functions. There are no machine instructions that are direct equivalents. Instead, we need to emulate their behavior with instructions that do exist. Let's start with an if statement. In an if statement, we only execute the code in this block if this condition is true. If the condition is false, we skip over this code. In assembly, the code inside the block gets translated normally, but before it, we have some instructions for evaluating the condition, and then we have a conditional jump instruction. In this case, to jump past the block we want to skip, but only if we're supposed to skip it.
The processor knows whether or not we're supposed to take this jump based on the result of the previous instruction. That instruction temporarily set some flags in the processor so we could remember the result by the time we got to this conditional jump to skip over this block.
If we're not supposed to skip it, then the processor ignores the jump and continues normally, conveniently executing the code inside the block. Notice that these machine instructions are effectively doing the same thing as our if statement? Let's see how jumps can emulate other source code behavior. There's
That's
the
kinda
if
cool.
else statement. Only execute this block if the condition is true. Otherwise, execute this block. In assembly, we have the code in the first block and the code in the second block. Before the first block, we have a comparison and conditional jump, like what we had earlier. In between the blocks, we have a regular non-conditional jump instruction. This is so that execution skips the second block if it just finished the first one, which is kind of how the if-else statement works if you think about it. Then there's the while loop. Only execute this block if this condition is true, and keep executing it over and over again until it's not true anymore. In assembly, we have the block's code, the instructions to evaluate the condition, and the jumps emulating the loop. Functions are a little more complicated. Basically, functions encapsulate a code block so that it can be used in multiple parts of a program. Most programmers out there should know that they also isolate context and they can do recursion and stuff. This is what its equivalent assembly code looks like. Let's run it to see what it does. Hitting the function call, we save all context into memory, allocate new space on top of it, execute the function code, which may involve calling more functions, and pop back down once it's done. This makes it possible for functions to call other functions or even themselves. You just push more memory and pop back down when you're done. So that's how compilers work. They take your source code and make machine code. But there's one problem. If you compile your program on one computer and then copy it over to another computer and try to run it, it might not work. If the new computer has a different operating system or has a different processor model, it probably uses different machine instructions. So, if you want your program to be able
This
to
is an
run on this
interesting
new
step.
computer, you better be able to compile to that computer's machine code. And if your program's users might run your software on different platforms, unless you're distributing the source, you're gonna need to keep a copy of an executable for every platform you want to run on. Every single one. Some languages like Java
pretty
sneak
funny.
around this issue. Instead of machine code, Java gets compiled to an intermediate representation.
I think. Oh, what is it? This is where they use the JDK. So any of my IT bros who might be hanging out on the stream remember Java JDE or JVMs or stuff like that. Getting
Known
into
as
that.
bytecode. And then the bytecode can get sent to other computers, where it gets converted to that specific computer's machine code when the program is run via an interpreter.
JRE,
It's a bit of a
Java Runtime
compromise.
Environment.
You get better portability, though it's less efficient. But regardless, the language you write your code in is compatible with a wide variety of processors and operating systems. Can you imagine what it was like back in the day when computer programming meant putting assembly
That's
or even
wild.
machine code onto punch cards? Not only would you need to figure out the correct holes to punch for each instruction, you wouldn't even be able to use your program on a different computer model because the other model expected you to punch different holes. Things are a little nicer these days. You just write a program, compile it, and test it with inputs and outputs. If only it were that simple. All thanks to the people who wrote the special program, the compiler. But remember that the compiler is a program itself. If people use compilers to develop programs, how was the compiler developed? Well, it was probably written and compiled in another language, or even the same language, compiling a compiler with a previous version of itself.
That's
If we
a
follow
compiler
this chain
inception.
backwards, at some point, we reach the origins of development tools, programs written directly in machine code that help you write other programs, literally automating part of the process of creating automation. The history of computer languages is pretty complex. No wonder it took decades to get where we are now. Remember that the next time you're writing code. We have all these beautiful things like syntax highlighting, static analysis, object-oriented programming, functional programming, libraries, linkers, build tools, and debuggers. But it's still amazing that we can just tell our computers to follow our exact instructions at the push of a button. No, wait. There we go. The push of a button.
Great programming humor right there.
Programming isn't so hard.
Oh my goodness. What a great video. That was actually super informative. I've always had a hard time expressing to friends and colleagues like what a compiler is and how software kind of works. And I think like minus some of like the deeper technical details, like I think that's a great way of encapsulating the concepts. It'd be super cool to do some of these crash courses. I mean, mind you, they're about 10 minutes long. I think we're going to wrap tonight's stream. Great, super quick little hang. Just wanted to talk about some fun stuff this week. We will definitely have a stream happening next week, potentially the week after. At some point in December, I will be taking a break minus the special James Webb Space Telescope, if that ends up happening on the 22nd. And then we'll be back in the new year. And we've got a couple of really interesting conversations and talks lined up, actually. One of them, we're going to be doing an interview with a epidemiologist and health policy PhD candidate, talking about evidence and understanding studies and how do we, interpret all of the science that's out there as we as lay people. What is our capacity for understanding all of the scientific innovation, and where do we need experts and intermediaries to help us contextualize and better understand the world that we're living in? So really excited about that conversation and a lot of other cool ones. Also, guys, we're always looking for ideas. So if anyone, if there's something you want to hear about, something you want to know about, hit me up. Let me know. We'll start talking about it. We'll make it an episode. For those guys who have stuck around, the serious, real, like true, did that too early. The true OG fans, thank you. Appreciate you coming to hang. It means a lot. And we're gonna leave it at that. So keep looking at the stars, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you all next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat channel. taking a break minus the special James Webb Space Telescope, if that ends up. Meta, then Facebook, started a broader push towards encryption and other privacy features in 2019. The delay could lead awkward timing, at least in the UK. The country is enacting